been working through a little series that I have simply entitled, What is the Church? This will be the last Sunday that I'm tackling this subject, at least for the time being. I don't have any plans in the future to be looking at this subject overall. And we have spent some time looking at different aspects of the church. This morning, I have entitled my message this time together, The Power of the Church. And we are going to be discussing, to some degree, as I mentioned last week, the subject of prayer. Dusty already mentioned to you in the myriad of announcements. Some weeks we have one, and today we seem to have 368 announcements. We all did well to stay attentive and alert. Except I did fall asleep, but don't tell. He mentioned that there is a week of prayer. That's next week. And we might be wondering why we're doing this or what this is about. And I just hope to lay the groundwork a little bit, just to kind of explain the thinking behind it. Perhaps it will encourage your own hearts. If you haven't been thinking about coming, maybe you would begin to wonder if maybe this is something for you. We're going to be setting aside, as it says, just a bit of time. 7 o'clock, we're going to gather together, we're going to pray. Why would the church do this? Well, if I can just tell you for one thing, it's not a bizarre idea. For generations, the church has gathered for the purpose of prayer. It seems anymore that churches tend to relegate prayer to just those people that kind of want to do that. It's interesting how we live in an age where we have more books than ever on marriage. We seem to live in a time when marriage is really falling apart, right, left, and center. We have more books than ever on parenting. We have more troubles in homes than seems than ever before. We have more books on how to get along with each other, and we all constantly are in bickering mode and fighting in problems and situations. We have more books on every financial thing we can imagine, and yet we seem to be more in debt and more troubled than ever before. It doesn't seem to matter the education that is available to us. There is something missing, fundamentally flawed within the church, general word church. I don't mean Pinegrove. I mean the general church in general. And it doesn't seem to dawn on everybody that at the same rate that we have relegated prayer to the back burner is the same rate that other problems and other issues have begun to come to the fore. And we're scrambling and we're trying to find the answers to the problems, and yet it sounds so simplistic. The church moves forward on her knees. I'm reminded of a passage in Deuteronomy. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, he's speaking to the children of Israel, of course, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. I think that's a good word of warning to the North American church. We are so comfortable at times. We've got everything we need. We have a lot of resources, financially and physically and otherwise. We've got a lot of things going for us. And it tends to be the case that we just start to rest on our laurels. We start to get a little bit, if I can use the word, lazy. We start to get a little bit dull spiritually, a little less sharp, a little less frosty, a little less interested in taking a bite into the culture. It's just who we are. We have taken that on board as if that's just normal and acceptable, and I think we need to press each other on to something deeper and richer. As was read this morning, a passage out of 2 Kings 19, we're going to be looking at 2 chapters this morning, rather a large chunk of Scripture. And by the way, a piece of trivia for you. We'll be looking at 2 Kings 18 and 19. This passage is paralleled in Isaiah 36 and 37. It's a bit of trivia for you in case you're interested. Isaiah is the prophet at the time of the recounting of the events in 2 Kings, and he also records what took place in the book of Isaiah. So if this is familiar to you and you say, I've never read Kings before, perhaps because you've seen it in another passage. That's quite an aside. I just want to lay out the kind of the dividing part of this message is really just starting with the situation. I just want to lay out for you what's going on in this passage, and I know it is in the middle of Old Testament stuff, and that's a little bit perhaps unlike what we're used to. It takes a bit of getting our heads around. So pardon me while I try to take you back a few thousand years into an era that is very unfamiliar to us. The country of Assyria, which is modern-day Iraq, was on a rampage at the time of this recording of this incident. They had been traveling around militarily and defeating and doing a great job of it. And now it comes about that they come to Jerusalem and they decide they're going to attack Jerusalem. So the king, Hezekiah, he sends to Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, a little cookie. He sends him, he throws him a bone, if you will. He gives him some gold. He gives him some money. He tries to appease him. And he sends him a little gift and he says, look, we're going to be nice to you. Here's a little something to put in your pocket. Leave us alone. King Sennacherib notices what the king of Israel has given them and says, well, if they've got this much that they can just throw out to us nilly-willy, imagine how much more they've got locked away behind the walls. Send some people up there and let's see what we can do to Jerusalem. And so we enter into the scene of this battle taking place, or beginning to form, as the king of Assyria begins to put its eyes towards Jerusalem. And the king of Assyria sent to Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh. Aren't those great titles? We're not actually 100% sure. We're pretty close, in the high 90s of what these names mean. So with Tartan, just to fill you in here, talking about Assyrian culture now. Tartan is an army general. He is a he is a ruler over a particular band of soldiers. Rabsaris would be a chief servant. He is probably subservient to the other two, the Rabshakeh and the Tartan. He is there to, peel their grapes and get their water, or whatever they do as chief servants. And the Rabshakeh, he is the field commander, the military leader, the spokesman. He's the one who is probably under the army general, and he is now the spokesman to set the stage. Just so you know, these three military leaders. And so kind of the picture is, if you will allow my little cartoon imagination, Israel's sound asleep thinking everything's great. These three men come waltzing up and knock on the palace door, not literally. And people inside, they kind of rub the sleep out of their eyes and realize they've got some croutons growing there. And they come out to the door and they open the door, and lo and behold, there's these three very fancy-looking men. And behind them, there's a vast army with spears all pointing at everybody's heart. And they say, hi, how are you? And suddenly they realize, ooh, something new is happening here. Yeah, that's not how the story goes, but just play it out in your mind that way. It's a little cooler. And they went up, I shouldn't say that. You can't embellish the Bible and make it any cooler than it is. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. And when they arrived, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway to the washer's field. Okay, so they didn't knock on the door. Okay, fine. We actually don't know where that is geographically. That's an aside, but that's what the scripture tells us, and that's where they met, wherever that is. And when they called for the king, there came out to them Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebaniah, the secretary, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder. So three men from Assyria come, and they've got something to say, and the king sends three of his men out to meet them. He sends out the palace administrator, the one who's in charge of the entire palace and oversees everything, the king's herald, the king's spokesman, and the scribe. The secretary would be the man who would, if you want to make an appointment to see the king, you'll have to look in my date book and let's arrange something. And then the scribe who's going to be taking down all that is going on. So these 6 men are standing out in the field, and they're about to speak, and the Rabshakeh, the military leader, on behalf of the Assyrian army, begins to speak. And the Rabshakeh said to them, say to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you rest this trust of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war? In whom do you now trust that you have rebelled against me? Behold, you are trusting in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. Part of the way that military battles began in the era that we're talking about, which is about 700 BC, by the way, part of it was a bit of strategy in throwing out words to each other, trying to get each other off their game. There was a bit of psychological warfare in just calling each other names. It's kind of how they began a battle. They would start to puff each themselves up and try to put the other guy down, and then they would retort back, and it would go back and forth verbally until finally it would become a heated thing, and finally it would come to war. But because sometimes war was a very difficult and challenging thing, if we could just talk to you and convince you, even lie to you about how great we are, maybe you'll just give up and we don't have to actually kill each other. So this war of words begins from the Rabshakeh. Well, isn't that interesting that this battle begins with a war of words? He's basically telling them that you're all talk. There's no power to you. And I don't know where you get this idea about leaning on on Egypt, but they're not going to help you. Now, by the way, we don't even know what he's talking about. It doesn't seem anywhere in the text or otherwise, from what I understand, that Israel was leaning on Egypt. He's just presuming that to be the case, and he's telling them how foolish it is, complete misinformation, and just completely disregarding them. You people are just all about talk. Isn't that what the world thinks when they look at us? Do we just get together on a Sunday morning and listen to some guy talk? That really we're just all about trying to stay awake while somebody talks. It's really just trying to make yourself feel good or do something somehow, some way, and whatever. You're just all talking. In fact, you're leaning on some crutch. You just need a crutch in your life. That's all that's going on there. A little bit of misinformation, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to believe it's true, and I'm going to say that about you. That's who you people are. The church is nothing but a bunch of people that get together, are all talk, no power, and you just got a crutch in your life. You need some sort of support. People get all kinds of crazy ideas about the church. I remember we came from a church, we were doing some advertising for an event that was coming up, and one of the doors we came to, I wasn't there, but this was the story that was relayed. The people said, we'd like to go to that church, but we hear that we're not able to go because we can't give 10% of everything that we own. And you know, if you go to that church, you have to give up 10% of everything. How in the world do you get that idea and believe that about those people down the street? But that's what they were believing. I know another church where they said the church is fighting from this reputation in the community, small community, that you can't go to that church unless you homeschool your children. Where did they get this idea from? But that's what the community says. Oh, you can't go there. You can drive past and you'll have to go to another church. Those people they're a little different. And people get all kinds of wacky, crazy, I don't know what they're saying about Pinegrove. I haven't lived here long enough. You've probably heard some things. Well, you're sipping coffee with your friends and doing whatever you do, and they come up with some crazy thing. Those Baptists today, you're like, what are you talking about? You never come across that? You haven't lived long enough. You haven't mingled long enough. I mean, people have got crazy, and they're not going to come in here. They've got the wrong ideas. Rabshakeh continues. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you are able on your part to set riders on them. He's telling them and reminding them of what Hezekiah has done. Now, there's an Old Testament reference. I don't want to get too boring here, but I got to fill you in the blanks. There's an Old Testament concept of high places. It's a pagan idea. And the pagan nations would build what they would call a high place, a ziggurat sometimes. It would just be a mound or a fancy little thing that they would build, and they would climb up and they would offer sacrifices to the false gods of their belief, to their false religions. And they would offer a sacrifice on the top. Sometimes it would even be their own children, if you can imagine. And they would build these things, and then Israel began to look around and say, ooh, how come we don't have anything cool like that? I think we should build some of those. And some of the kings actually went ahead and built some of these. And there would be a bad king that would do it and build it, and the next king would come along and he would tear them down. And that would be Hezekiah. Hezekiah came in and said, this is not right. And some of these high places would be built, and then they would worship the true God in a false way. They would say, oh no, we're worshiping Jehovah. And they would come up with their own form of worship where all the time God himself had prescribed how to worship him. But they would say, oh no, no. We've got our own idea. We've got our own way. You can worship God the way you want. I like to worship God the way I want. Sound familiar to you? And so, we would like to do this, and Hezekiah comes along, and being the good king, if you'll understand what I mean by that, heart after God, he tears these down. And so the Rabshakeh now says, hey, you even tore down your high places. So now, in Rabshakeh's pagan mind, that would mean, therefore, you have offended God, therefore God can't possibly be with you. And he has, talking about this idea of false worship, and then he says, come now, let's make a wager about this. Let's make a wager about this. I'll bet you, even if we give you 2,000 horses, you guys are so pathetic that you can't even still win the battle, that you couldn't even put soldiers on them. It's like saying to him, we're still going to beat you with one arm tied behind our back. We'll even give you the military strength to fight us, and you're still going to lose. That's how pathetic you people are. You've got nothing. Nothing. So now the world looks at us. Who do you think you are to be worshiping just one God in one way? Tearing down all these other false idols. Who do you think you are to be up there at your highfalutin hill talking like you've got the truth? What's that about? Who put you in charge of holding on to the truth and being the kingpin? Oh, you think you're so special, you people. What's the matter with you? Why, you are so weak and so feeble, you couldn't even do it. You couldn't hurt a fly. You are nothing. Nothing. I don't need to tell you that that's ultimately the way the world looks at the church. Now, they don't say it in those words, but that's the heart. And we will win with one arm tied behind our back. You don't frighten us. You mean nothing to us. The Rabshakeh continues. How then can you repulse a single captain among the least of my servants when you trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Moreover, is it without the Lord that I've come against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. So now he comes and says to them, on top of that, we're all on the same team. We've got the same God you've got. You're not any special thing. The same God that you worship told me to come here and to wipe you out. So, surprise! That's why we're here. You can't be trusting in God. We're all on the same page. We all worship the same God. We just have different routes of getting there. Don't make such a big deal out of this thing. This one way to God through Jesus and the death of Jesus for yourself. And come on, don't get all upset. Don't be so narrow-minded. We're all together in this. Smarten up. So, jumping on to verse 32. Don't listen to Hezekiah when it misleads you by saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Remember, everywhere the king of Assyria has gone, he's conquered. He goes on to the next country, the next city, he conquers. And he's done that and done that and done that. That's been in their living memory, their understanding of what he's done, and now he's there at their door. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his hand out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim and Hena and Iva? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands had delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? You guys are all the same. Every church is exactly the same as any other church. There's no power to it. There's no real thing going on. There's no real bite or edge. You're just doing your little thing, and everybody's doing it, and whatever. You're not going to change anything. You're not going to make anything happen. The culture's going to do what it does. We're the boss. We're in charge. You're just a nothing. You're in the background. You go play your little fun little game. Get together on a Sunday morning. Listen to somebody drone on. Just go do your little thing. Oh, have fun with it. You use your crutch. Be nice to other people. We're all the same. We're all just getting on in this world. We all worship one God. Everybody goes the same way anyways. You just go do your little thing. We all know that that's the way we're seen. We understand that. So what are we supposed to do with that? How do we react to that? What is, in a sense, our response to that? Well, the response of the church in the present day we live in is relatively interesting, in my opinion, which you didn't ask for now comes to you free of charge. It's fascinating how many how-to books we've got on the market, and how many 1, 2, 3, 4 step books that we've got to tell us just how to get the church aligned to be a little more acceptable to the culture. And this is what we need to do, and this is a program you've got to have it. The church is looking back down to some other church in somewhere in California or whatever, and they've got some big thing happening, some new fad thing, and they've got some big church busting at the seams, so we all run down and write down what are the 7 things you're doing. It has to be 7, because that's a perfect number. We're going to write down those 7 things, we're going to publish it, we'll send it up here, and before long we've got a program, and then we've got a seminar, we're all telling you, if you do these 7 things, your doors will be bursting at the seams, because we've seen it happen, we've got the new thing. And that'll last for 2 or 3 years, and then the next big thing will come along, and a new wave will come, and you've got to get to the new book and the new seminar, and you've got to be running down the highway, and pastors are run off their feet, never feeling like they're catching up, and always trying to keep up the new thing and the new thing, and trying to stay ahead of the game, and everybody's coming down the highway at you the wrong way, and you're just feeling like a fish going upstream, and you're fighting against it all. I know you don't feel that, but every person in leadership feels the weight of trying to keep up, Oh, you can't keep up. That's the church's response today. Here's Hezekiah's response. And Hezekiah prayed. How weird is that? How novel is that? And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God who alone of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Hezekiah's prayer begins with just a hunger, if I can put it this way, to acknowledge God as God. It's like him saying, Our Father, who art in heaven. He just begins his prayer in an attitude of realizing, do you know what? I don't have a program. I don't have a system down. I don't have the money, the resources, the talent, the gifts. We can't fix this problem. This is a God-sized problem. This is bigger than us. This is bigger than me. We can't appease this man. We can't pull strings. We can't do anything to change the landscape of what we're living in. We've got only one hope. You know, God, you are the God, you are the King, you are sovereign, you are over it all, you see it all, you know it all, you know exactly what we're facing, you've got the whole big picture, you've got the answer. And he begins coming to that place. How novel is this? How novel is this to just simply acknowledge God is God. I could say a second attitude that he had is he knew their situation was desperate. Desperate. I'll tell you, there's nothing more powerful than a prayer meeting with people on their face before God who know that they're in a desperate state. Can I just suggest to you sometimes that one of the reasons that you face problems and struggles, as hard as this is for you to hear, here's the thought. That one of the reasons that you face struggles and heartache and hardship and whatever place that God has put you in, and you begin to feel alone and burdened, because sometimes you are alone and burdened. Nobody else understands you. Could I just suggest a really radical thought that maybe God has put this pressure on you? Your kids are rebelling, your husband's whatever, your wife's not this, your family's apart, you're all that's going on. Why? Because God is calling you to be desperate. God is asking you to get desperate. You are looking at counselors and books and people and every solution you can come up with, and maybe it's enough money if we just could make more money and whatever. And God is waiting for you to get to a place, I'm just suggesting it, to get to a place where you are just desperate enough that all you've got is God. And that's what he wants. He wants you to know that you're dependent on Him. Now some of us, and that's hard to hear because some of us have been in that place for a long, long time. You have been desperate for a long, long time. But I'll tell you what, pride keeps us from prayer. Because we are so self-satisfied, we've got nothing, I can fix every problem. We just have to work it out, and we'll just get along, and we'll just put up with it, and we'll just move on. And you never get desperate enough to really want to pray. Hezekiah prayed before the Lord, said, "O Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone." He just comes with a broken, a humble heart. You know what prayer looks like? It is desperate people with a humble heart. And then He does this amazing thing. He reminds God that He's being mocked. God, could I just remind you of this? This is not about my reputation. This is not about me being comfortable in life. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear, open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which He has sent to mock the living God. This is your name on the line. Don't you see that we're a family that holds up your name? And other people look at us, and they see you, a reflection of you. And here we are, living like this, and all these troubles in our home, and all these struggles going on. Don't you know, God, that it's you that's being mocked when they look at us? Don't you see that it's your name on the line? God, come, not for us, for you. Come because you have got to tell the world that you are God, that you are the King, that you are the one enthroned between the cherubim. You are the Almighty. We need you, not for us, for you. And that's a hard prayer. You just want God's glory. And then he goes on to play out this theme. Verse 17, truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands. It's true. The king of Assyria has come in and just taken out lands and put other gods in the fire. They cast their gods into the fire. For they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore, they were destroyed. So now, O Lord our God, save us, please, from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Lord, are God alone. Do you know what he's calling for? He's saying, God, your reputation is at stake. Your reputation's at stake. It is your name on the line. That in fact, at the end of the day, we just want you to be glorified. Don't you see, God, that those other gods were defeated? And so now the king of Sennacherib thinks, well, they were no gods at all, so big fat hairy deal. There's nothing in that. And don't you see that if nothing happens in this church, that if there's no power within this place, that the world will just look at us and say, oh, you're just like everybody else. You're just like all the other gods and all the other people. But our heart says, God, would you please do something here to show the world that you really are God? Would you come and save a sinner? Would you come and transform a life? Would you come and change a family? Would you come and do something so that you are glorified, so that the whole world has no other option but to say, there is a God. And if you want to find him, you can go down the street to that church, because I know he's there. Because he does stuff. There are things happening in that church that are happening nowhere else. Now, I can't guarantee you that's the outcome of what will happen. But I'll tell you this. If we don't pray, what we have now is exactly what we'll always have. We need to be at least pressing in and pressing forward and calling on the living God to come and do something. His name is at stake. His glory is on the line. We're just a myriad one amongst 1,000. We're just a passing thing of whatever. Do you want that of Pinegrove, of your church? No, I don't. We only want your glory. And I got this in the mail this week. Once you buy a book from this company, you're best friends. What happens? And you get their little magazine, and I became a preferred customer. I know you're not, and I know you'll sign autographs later. I found this in one of the books that they were, advertising, and want to sound critical. I'm just reading what it says, just advertising a book. And I want to sound like I'm some heresy hunter and I'm trying to set the world straight. But I'll tell you what, this is exactly the issue that we face in the age we live in. It's called the circle maker. Learn how to draw prayer circles around your God-sized dreams. Does anyone have a problem right now with that first sentence? Learn how to draw prayer circles. A, what does that mean? B, around your God-sized dreams. You dream it up, and I'll show you how to draw a circle around it. This book explores the methodology of praying with holy confidence. Woo! Then we have another little blurb. What impossible dream is God calling you to pray about? Sharing personal stories, the author will help you achieve your desires through audacious prayer. Forget God's glory. You can learn to pray for what you want. You can learn to pray for the big things that are going to make you happy. Forget God. Forget His purposes. Forget thy kingdom come, thy will be done. You can learn to pray audacious prayers and put a circle around the things that are going to be your big dreams. And this is what the church is up against. People are looking at this and they come and they say, here's the new program for us. Ooh, look, it's a DVD series. Why don't we do that one? And we can learn how to pray audacious prayers in prayer circles. And ooh, that's so exciting. What is this? I don't want to sound overly critical. I've not read the book. I don't know anything about it. But on face value, honestly, stupidity. It's foolishness. James 4:3. You ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly. Spend it on your passions. It's one of the struggles of prayer. People say, well, I pray and nothing happens. Because you're not praying that God would do what God wants to do. You're praying that you'll get rich, and you'll get healthy, and you'll get happy, and you'll get whatever. So what does prayer look like? Well, we've kind of walked through this slightly, and I'll just quickly summarize. Prayer, as we saw in this text, just submits to God. God, you alone are God. We don't have a program. We don't have an answer. We don't have a solution. We just need you. We're so desperate for you. You're the only hope we've got. You're the only answer we know. You've got to come and act. You have to come and respond. We want you to work in our hearts. We want you to work in our lives. We want you to do a fresh thing here. We just come with humble hearts, just open hands. It's just a group of people that get together and say, God, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to answer these problems. We're just looking to you to come and do something among us. There's a humility, and it's just asking for God to glorify Himself in our midst. Simple as that. So we go into this crazy, wild, obscure idea in an age that we live in of calling the church to gather every night at 7 o'clock to pray. Have you ever heard of this before? I'll tell you, 100 years ago, it was the most common thing the church knew. Regular, concerted efforts to prayer. We live in an age where this is not the popular thing. I'm the fish going upstream. We're going to be a little weird. Welcome to the game. We're going to try something, with all humility, I'll say a little more biblical. We're just going to get on our face and call on God. There's nothing fancy about it. We just know that we need God. We need God when I stand up here and speak so that something will happen, so that lives will be changed. We need God so that our families will be touched, so the kids downstairs will hear the word and come to life, so our young people will catch on fire for God, and we'll not have to figure out what we're doing wrong and what strings we need to pull to keep them in the church. God will be working in their hearts. God will be coming. He'll keep me from saying some stupid, foolhardy thing when I stand up here on a Sunday morning, which is way too easy to do, and I've already done more than once, and just wacky things that don't need to be said because it happens. We're just going to meet back there, and I know this already, and you know this. Not everybody can come. It's an awkward time. We all work hard. We get home late. Supper, kids, whatever going on. It doesn't happen for everybody. I know that. But in your heart of hearts, could you join us for prayer if you can't come? Could you just spend 5-10 minutes at home and just do something and just get out of your routine? And just say, God, we're going to try to meet you specially this week. This week is set aside to call on you. Can you just come for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? You don't have to come for the whole time if you can't come for the whole time. So what? We're just coming and going and praying. It's open-ended. We're not planning to stay here till midnight. It's not some crazy thing. If in half an hour we're done, we're done. If in 3 hours we're done, we're done. And God will direct and we'll just follow that. And we're not trying to make this bigger than it is or something that it's not. We just know that we have a need as a body to constantly and continually be seeking God's face. That's all that this is. Because we only move forward in prayer. I'm going to tell you the end of the story really quick. 2 Kings chapter 19. Got a dramatic ending. That night, the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. So they're waiting for an answer. Are you going to give up? And they go to bed and they wake up and their soldiers are dead. Not everybody. When the people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. So then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, packs his baggage, snaps the lid down on his suitcase, says, forget those people, departed, went home, and lived at Nineveh. Woo! That's a cool ending. I mean, in a military story, that's a cool ending. We're not praying for the death of anybody. You realize that. But as a military thing that's going on here, and this is a theocracy, and they're in the middle of a physical war, God is fighting for them, and that's what happens in battle. Armies die, 185,000 in God fought. Is that not a cool ending to that story? All they did was go to bed, and they wake up, and the problem is solved. I'm not going to tell you that that's how God works all the time in every situation, but that's our biblical example. And that's what we look to by faith. And we simply call on God because this is how the church behaves. We pray. Let's do that now.